Now, hello everyone and welcome to Ebi Speaks. My name is Ibinabo Enebi, and today we will be talking about finding love after loss. And it kicks off my love and relationship series that I've started this February. Well, like you all know, February is usually a month of love, and we're all drugged into the love euphoria. Some of us are expecting chocolates and getaways and surprises and gifts and dinners and even proposals. But we know that in real life or in reality, it's not always the case. Because, for example, I lost my mother 20 years ago on Valentine's Day, and I lost my adopted son 7 years ago on February 22nd. And those moments were very difficult and tough times for me. And I think, like me, also, some of you have also been through or are going through tough times, and you've suffered heartbreaks, you've made mistakes. Some of us are crying and we're lonely and we're hurting, and we need direction, we need hope, and we need healing. And I hope that today's episode and this month's love and relationship series would offer you the hope and the healing that you so desire. So my special guest, as a matter of fact, I have two special guests. I have a special appearance, and then I have my guest that I earlier advertised, and he is a pastor. He is a management expert. He holds an HND in biochemistry. He holds an MBA, and he has a postgraduate diploma in the West African in the West African Theology Seminary. He is Pastor Richard Iberase. Pastor Richard?
Thank you.
Pastor Richard is the pastor of Amazing Grace Parish, URBC, Ikorodu, Lagos, and he's the chairman, Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, PFN, Ikorodu West Chapter, and resides in Lagos. And I have a special guest appearance by Dr. Amoni Jasper. She's a general practitioner, a wellness coach with an edge. And I just want to say particularly to Dr. Amoni that it was short notice, and I had to bamboozle her. And she agreed to come. I'm so grateful for you. I'm very, very grateful. And I hope that together that we will be able to tackle and do justice to our topic. And for everyone who is watching, oh my gosh, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out to be here today. I am highly appreciative of the fact that you're here. Listen, I can't thank you enough. And for my first time viewers, you're welcome, welcome, welcome. And to my subscribers, thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibinabo Enebi. As a matter of fact, if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And then you can follow me on all my other social media handles. You can follow me on Instagram, Ibinabo Enebi. You can follow me on my Facebook page. It's Ibinabo Enebi. So, and then also you can be a part of this conversation. What you can do is if you're watching via Zoom, I want you to leave your comments in the comment box. And if you're watching via YouTube, leave your comments as well. I just want us to, to banter, and then for you to share your experiences and also ask your questions. Please, your questions are very important. And what else? Yeah, so Pastor Richard, once again, welcome to Ebi Speaks. And once again, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. Yeah?
Pleasure.
Very good. So now, Pastor Richard, when I talked to you about this program, I knew that you were a pastor. But then I had a conversation with you and I said, but today, I want you to take sides with our humanity, to share the pain, to share the challenges of loneliness, of what it is, suffering loss, and how we can open our hearts to find love again. And because you're a pastor, You can also tell us how divinity can intersect with our humanity to bring about healing. Now, you were married for 25 years and you lost your wife in the process. And I want to say, because I'm meeting you for the very first time, I want to say, accept my condolences.
Thank you.
Was it a sudden situation or was it protracted? How did it happen?
Thank you very much. I'll start by saying it was a very sudden situation. And that was what made it very, very traumatic. On a Saturday, Upper Room Baptist Church had a workers' meeting. My wife was there. She led a section. She was in the child evangelism ministry. She was there. She was all over the place, and everybody saw her. On Sunday, she ministered in the parish where then I was at Mount Zion Parish then. And on Monday, I left for Bible study. Monday is Bible study for us at Upper Room. But because my mother visited, and so she had to stay at home while I went to church for Bible study. I was in the church when my son called me and said, my mommy says she's not feeling fine. I said, what is the problem? And he said it's stomach discomfort. Fortunately, I lived with a doctor who was upstairs. We were living on the ground floor. So I said, go and tell the doctor. And they went up, they told the doctor, he came down, examined her, gave a prescription, and they sent it to me by text. So on my way from church, I bought the drugs. And I go home and I was in very serious, distressing situation. I haven't seen her in that stage. She was vomiting, with all the strange. I said, what's the matter? She said she doesn't know. Anyway, she took the drugs and then we went to bed. But all that night, she never slept. All that night, she kept vomiting. I will doze off, but when I hear, I wake up. Then she said I should call the younger brother who happened to be a doctor. And I said, no need. That was about 2 a.m. The younger brother lives so far. I said, he cannot come. He will not be able to sleep. And there's no point. I said, let it be morning before I call. So I did. And that one told me what to give her to arrest the vomiting. And I went out, I bought. But he told me, don't give her food, just give her food, let the system clear. So I went bought the things, but even as she took those foods, yes, she didn't vomit. She stopped vomiting because of the drug, but she kept complaining of the discomfort, that the stomach is feeling bloated. So at about 2:30, there was no relief. She wasn't vomiting again, but she was still in very serious pain. And I touched her leg. I noticed they were getting cold. I said, no, I cannot continue to be in the house. So I took her and she said, where are we going? I said, I'm going to your brother's clinic. Because by God's grace, we had very good health record. We didn't have a clinic around us. We didn't have an hospital that we ever got used to. So I put her in the car and I drove her to the brother's clinic. And when we got there, right from the reception, her pulse was extremely low, that they had to start giving intravenous drip right there in the reception. And so the pulse came up and the brother said, I will observe her till tomorrow. But he then invited me and said, if you didn't bring your wife tonight, you would have lost her. And he told me we might be in for a surgical emergency. I said, what do you mean? He said, she's vomiting, she's not stooling. It means the passage, something is blocking somewhere. I can't say what it is. It's either a perforated ulcer or an intestinal blockage. It will require a surgery to know what is blocking it. So, but let me observe her overnight. I left with my wife telling me, get me this when you are coming tomorrow. And I said, okay. And I went to the house. Of course, I got those things ready. Early the next morning, which was a Wednesday now, I got ready, but it was too early. I just told myself, saying, no, this woman didn't sleep yesterday. Let me let her sleep. Let me not go too early. So I was dilly-dallying, and then I got a call from my brother-in-law. He said, where are you? I told him. He said, please start coming. We didn't sleep last night. I said, for God's sake, even with you there? He said, yes. He said, and I have already sent her to a clinic. There's a doctor I trust. He's good with surgery. I've sent her there. So don't bother to come, go straight there. I said, okay. So I left and I was driving. I got to somewhere in Ketu, I got his call, I picked. He said, that doctor said, I won't touch her with a 6-foot pole. I said, what's the matter? He said the doctor is also querying either intestinal blockade or a perforated ulcer, but he would prefer that we take her to surgical emergency at the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital. So I went to that clinic. I met her in the vehicle with a drip on, of course, seriously distressed. So we drove from there straight. This was a Wednesday now, straight to the general hospital, that is Lagos State University Teaching Hospital. And right from the reception, for the first time, in fairness to them, they took action. In short, the same thing that happened the previous day when the pulse was almost zero was there again. And they took action right in the reception before they asked for money. I must give them credit. And then they started their investigation. The investigation came up with the same thing. It's either a perforated ulcer or an intestinal blockage. They will have to do what they call laparoscopy. They need to go in, they have to open up to know which of these two is the problem. And so they did all this scan and all of that. So about evening, the lady who was heading the team said, we must do this surgery today. By tomorrow, this woman will be too weak to be taken into the theater. So about 6:45 that Wednesday evening, they took her into the surgery room. And from then till about 11, nobody came out of the surgery room. Of course, we were bothered because I was there. The brother-in-law who is a doctor, the wife who is also a doctor, my first daughter, and the fiancé and my cousin were all waiting. Some members of the church had come, my GO had come, prayed, and then left, waiting to hear the good news. And at about 11, one doctor came and said, doctor, what's the problem? I said, no, we have almost finished. She will soon be out. Not knowing he was just trying to calm us down. When that guy got in again, we never saw anybody again, no information again, until about 4 a.m. on Thursday. And then the lady came out and said, I said, doctor, what's the problem? He said, we knew it was intestinal blockage or a perforated ulcer, but we were taken aback by what we saw. He said, we have a 72-hour battle. If she survives 72 hours, then we are home and dry. But what we saw was a massive tumor suspected to be cancer. And their border was that it had affected a lot of organs around. So when he brought out the tumor, they brought out of her. And also, this will be analyzed to be sure it is cancer or not. They do a test, they will not agree it is. And then determine the stage. And then he said, well, 72 hours, if she survives 72 hours, then we'll start the battle of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and all of that. Well, of course, I was happy. So I sought their permission to see her. They said, no, I should wait. So later they allowed me to see her. And when I got into the theater, wow, I met her with oxygen mask, very labored breathing. For a child of God, I had hope that yes, and they left me. I prayed and I prayed as much as I could pray. They didn't hurry me. So I left and they said I should go and buy drugs. I went, bought the drugs. They sent me to go and buy drugs a second time. I was at the gate when my cousin called me and said, Brother Richard, come back. I said, what? He said, come back. But then she was in the hospital. So when she said, come back a second time, I knew the unexpected had happened. So I drove back and they broke the news to me. So it was a case of Monday to Thursday morning. That was about 9 a.m. 25th July of that year. And that was how I started a journey I never planned or desired. So it was just as short as that. It was so sudden. And as a matter of fact, the brother who is a doctor was very, very aghast and said, wait a minute, how does someone have a cancer and was never sick, didn't lose weight, nothing, you know? And the doctor that talked to us said the cancer was suspected to be at 4th stage, and
Stage 4.
Stage 4, yeah. So that was why the brother was very, very shocked, So that's how it happened. It was too sudden. There was no, and of course, no preparation. So that was it.
Pastor Richard, I am so sorry to hear this.
Yeah.
I've been a victim of cancer myself, so I know the way it is. Wow. So how did, and when you said, and that was how you had to prepare for something you were not prepared for. And how did losing her impact you and the children? What were the challenges?
And of course, it was a big shock. Number one was that I became a father and a mother at the same time. Fortunately, we had a very closely knitted family. We were friends, everybody. The impact on everybody differs from one person to the other. I must say that my son was the most hard hit, I must say, because we had only one son and they were very close. When you find them playing, you would think they are mates, so it was so heartbroken. All of us were just shattered. We couldn't just put things together. But it came at a time, we had 2 of our kids who just graduated. They were doing youth corps. When you are heaving a sigh of relief that, load has reduced. And there were just 2 remaining in the university. And now this came up. It was not easy. We had to cope. When these things happen, you don't have a choice. You just must brace up.
Yeah, but that's what they say to us that's what they say to men. You just have to brace up. You just have to face it like a man. But there were challenges.
Sure they were.
How were they? What were they?
First, the first challenge that comes with losing a spouse is that you are now alone. That person you used to bounce ideas off with is no longer there. Now you will now know that even the quarrels that does happen in the course of relating with your spouse, they were good. Nobody to quarrel with, nobody to laugh with. So you have to take every decision. Then, like I said, I now have to try and cushion the effect of the children, because hard hit as I was, I imagine how hard hit they were. So I felt a responsibility to cushion the effect as much as I could, talking with them. And those were some of the challenges. And we have gotten along too, except you have specific questions, but those were there. It was loneliness that you cannot describe. And there were hopes, there were projects we were carrying on. We're hoping, we'll soon be through with this. When we finish this, we'll do this. All the dreams suddenly crashed.
And what about your faith in God? Because you were very active in church. You believed in God. Did it in any way shatter your faith in the power of prayer? The Bible tells us that he would take away the diseases of Egypt. And, when we pray, we believe for the best. And so when that happened, suddenly your wife was active in church. She was, ministering and all of it. And all of a sudden there was cancer, stage 4. Yeah. Didn't it conflict your faith in God's word?
Yeah. To be very, very realistic, yes, it bothered me. I tended to ask God questions. I told him, I'm sure you know what I'm going to do. So even if I do that which you don't accept, you just have to have mercy on me. It bothered me, but I must say, when some messages come, you don't know what it's going to be. The lady that sweeps my office told me one Sunday that she was sweeping and cleaning my table and my chair, and God told him, pray for this man so that what will happen will not discourage him. And she told me, I didn't know what was going to happen that would discourage me. I didn't expect this. So it shook me, but I knew I had no other place to go but God again. So that was it.
So So I want to take you up on on something. So it shook you. And what were the things that you didn't want? You asked God to forgive you in case you did them.
Yes, for example, questioning him. Who am I to question God? Because I was wondering, why would you take my wife at this time? Okay, they say it's cancer. Okay, fine. So where were you when it started? Couldn't you have stopped it? Aren't you the omnipotent, omniscience God? And when I kept asking those rhetorical questions in my heart, somewhere along the line, it's like snapping back from a dream or something, realizing that you are talking to God. And of course, no excuse, although God understands us, no excuse for you being rude, in quotes, to God. So when I just asked God, mercy, you know how I feel at this time. You felt it. When you got to Lazarus' graveside, you also wept. You know what it is. So those were the things. It was quite hurting.
Okay. Now, just quickly now, I just want to thank everyone who's coming in, who's just joining me. Today, we're talking about finding love after loss. And it's the beginning of my series, Love and Relationship. And my special guest is Pastor Richard Iberase, and I have a special appearance by Dr. Amoni Jasper. And hopefully we're going to do justice to the topic. And please, if you have any questions or contributions, please feel free to leave them in the comment box. If you have, if you're watching via Zoom and if you're watching via YouTube, please leave them in the comment box. I just want us to participate and let me know what you think. Pastor Richard, was there any form of therapy for the children?
When you say therapy, well, nothing specific as in calling in a psychologist or any such. What we did, because we were quite a well-bonded family, we sat together and just discussed it. And we realized that, well, we needed to move ahead. We thought of what would she wish to see. If they see from there, she would wish to see us forging ahead, not allowing this to bring us down. She would want to see us achieving the dreams that we've all shared. And so that was it. That was we encouraged ourselves in the Lord, like the Bible would say. And we kept on doing that.
Very good. And I want us to talk about finding love again. What was it like for you going back to the dating scene?
Well, of course, it wasn't easy because it's like me going back to where I thought I had left. And I never thought I would start looking for somebody to date, get to study, get to pray again, and all of that. Of course, and this time, it was scary for me. I've lived with a wife for 25 years. Now I'm going to start thinking of living with another person. So I'm going to go through the process of studying and knowing that person. There is a fear of making a wrong choice. Marriage is such that if you get into the wrong marriage, you are in trouble. I saw something on Facebook one day, I laughed, but after laughing, I gave it some thought. That thing I saw was, I said, if you marry wrongly, even the devil will leave you alone because he knows you are finished already.
That's true. You become a philosopher.
So here I am now, I've got to look for another wife. And so the fear of getting the wrong person, grown-up children in the house, the ministry, and then life generally, it was not funny. But I knew I needed to do something.
And when I was reading through your profile, you said the vicissitudes of life necessitate. Oh God, help me. So events, circumstances now made you to be married. So how did the dating scene, how was it different from when you were as a young man? What were so you had to pray, so at what point then, how did the woman come into your life? And how did you know she was the right person for you?
Well, the first thing I did a year after I lost my wife, it became clear I had to remarry again. I went to God and I prayed. A year, yes, a whole year. I didn't even think of it. I just was still trying to get myself together. So I prayed a prayer. I must just let you know. I just told God, one, I want a wife, I want a sister, I want a friend, and I want a mother for my children. And I want a support for the ministry, because right now at this age, my desire of the ministry. If you have a wrong wife, of course, that's the end of the matter. So I prayed, and of course.
I think you're on mute again.
Are we okay?
Yeah, you said you prayed.
Yes, I prayed, and I said, you heard what I said. I told God I wanted a wife, a friend, a sister, a mother for my children, and a very strong support for me in ministry. I said ministry is a thing that is uppermost in my mind now. I must not fail in that field. So I started, and I had a number of dates, I must confess. And at one time or the other, I eliminate as I felt led with what I was seeing. And I kept eliminating. And then finally, that process is another process with a lot of
exactly.
temptation.
So I want us to talk about that now.
Oh, of course.
As a pastor, you had a lot of women that were all over you. I mean,
that's not untrue. That's very correct. But that is
yes. So
that made it necessary for me to be more careful. And even when you don't even have intention, people who are around you will be reading meanings to every of your move. So you must not only be careful, you must be seen to be doing the right thing. So it was not an easy thing. I needed to be careful. I needed people to see that there was no hanky-panky. But of course, there were temptations in the process.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sure you want to hear that aspect.
Of course.
There were temptations, but by God's grace, I could cope. Because for 5 years, that was not, it's not 2 years, 5 years, I wasn't married. And in the process, I had ladies. Yeah, they were the ones who wanted me to marry them. They were the ones I would have loved to marry. They were the ones I genuinely liked. They were the ones that really caught my fancy. There's no lying about it, but I was always conscious of something. If I'm a pastor and I preach, I must be a doer of what I preach. So that was a caution I had. And I must say something. My late wife, when she was alive, I must say, with all modesty, I'm a bit of a ladies' man. She was always bothered. All these your ladies, how by sure, and all of that. And she always begged me, don't embarrass me. So even now that she was no more, I thought I should do her memory well by also not falling, by also not falling. Moreover, I worship in a church. I was a pastor in a church that has zero tolerance for such things. In Okorum Baptist Church, as a pastor, you fall into that, and it gets to the authorities' knowledge. You are going to be called out in one of the biggest programs we have monthly. It will be announced. You will be suspended, so everybody knows what happened. And that was not a funny thing for me. So I knew I needed, and of course, the God we serve is all-knowing. Even if I could do some of this hanky-panky thing and nobody knows, there's somebody that knows, the all-knowing God, who is the person I ought to please. So these were my guiding principles that helped me, cope with the 5 years. And eventually I met the person I'm married to now through a friend. That friend, on my birthday that year, I had prayed for a birthday present from God. And so I didn't know how to, of course, I prayed for a wife as a birthday present for 5 years. I mean, you will agree that that's not a small time. And that day, I think that friend called me. Unfortunately, he's no more now. He said, "Oh boy, what did they do? Don't tell your wife die now. You don't go marry." I said, but I define wife. He said, what kind of wife are you looking for? So we just talked about some guidelines. He said, okay, I'm going to give you somebody. Go and fast and pray. I said, I'm not fasting. Go and ask the person whether she want to marry somebody of my age. I said, before I start fasting and praying, I need to know that I have something I'm fasting over. And so he said, okay. And that was how we started. And a few days after, I said, okay, yes, the fellow also wants to pray. You two go and pray. So that was how we got to where we are today.
Okay, Pastor Richard, I want to throw in this thing. Because I'm a woman, so I want to throw this arrow at you. Well, good arrow, though, is just a question. Pastor Richard, when women lose their husbands,
yeah,
the last thing they want to think about is marriage. Society doesn't allow them. A friend of mine was here last year, and she talked about how you expected to die a social death when you lose a spouse. And yet, for men, your friend was oh boy. So what do you think that those standards are right?
If I will start by saying that expectation is not biblical. Let's even take the Bible. Somewhere in Corinthians, Paul was saying, the widow who is of age to marry, please go and marry. And he even told the church, such people, you don't bother about them looking for how to keep them. That's one. Then two, it's unfair to think they should die to social life. When the Bible said it is not good a man should be alone, it's not necessarily the gender man. It's applicable. If I felt lonely when I lost my wife, a woman who loses the husband is also going to feel lonely. She's gotten somebody she was so used to, they could share anything, and now that person is not there. It's going to be as painful as it was for me. But we always say women cope better. Maybe it's because the society conditions them. Otherwise,
yeah,
I think so. So I always think, I came across some widows whom I wasn't considering for marriage. They were young enough to, and I called them, come. Why aren't you thinking of remarriage? Say, no, I don't want trouble of men, this, that. Sometimes I'm not able to ask, so how are you dealing with the natural instincts that God implanted in man? If a woman loses her husband, when she has healed enough, she should prayerfully look for a partner. The fourth reason God started the marriage in Israel, he came and saw Adam lonely, playing with animals and all of that. He said, no, this is not good. It is not good that man should be alone. So I don't believe that if a woman loses her husband, she should stay unmarried forever. Like Paul said, he was talking to me and said, if you can stay on marriage, good. But if you cannot, instead of burning with lust, go and marry. And these instincts are implanted by God. So let's face it, women should also remarry if they lose their husband. That's my take on that.
Fantastic. Pastor Richard, now I just want you to hold on there, and I want to bring in Dr. Amoni Jasper. Dr. Amoni, thank you so much for your patience. And I wanted to craft the scenario where you would come in and let's talk. So with you, I want us to dissect the anatomy of suffering, loss, and grieving. And you've heard everything that Pastor Richards had said. Like, if you heard my intro, I too suffered loss. I suffered loss February 14th, about 20 years ago. And then my adopted son died, February 22nd, 7 years ago. And so, especially now in this time when Valentine is here, and of course I have those anniversaries on this month, how can we, go through or find love and healing, as the case may be, in these times, in these particular months, yeah?
Good evening, everyone. Ibisticks, I will call you that from our conversation this morning.
Yes. Yeah.
Pastor Richard, all I can say is the grace of God has been with you, and you're an amazing man. I don't know you, but hearing your account and how you have come through, I think it's just the grace of God that has been with you. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head that society has conditioned women. I must do a disclaimer that I'm not speaking in any professional capacity. I don't claim to have suffered loss to the extent that yourself, Pastor Richard, have suffered. I cannot imagine the pain that you went through. My mother is alive and well, Ibisticks. I don't know how you've coped with that, but I suffered the loss of my grandmother, who I lived with. And every holiday from secondary school, my siblings would go back to our parents' home, and the driver would take me to the village. So I'm a bit of a village girl that way.
Like me?
More recently, I was on the phone on a video WhatsApp to my family home and witnessed the passing of my father, who I was extremely close to, as many daughters are. So that is my claim to loss. But by virtue of the job I do, I see so many people I can't count, from different walks of life, from different nationalities, from different statuses. And there's one thing that everybody looks for: to be seen, to be heard, to be felt, to be acknowledged as a human being. And loss is one of the major things that at some point will come to all of us. And we can't run away from it. It's what it is. And that's the destruction or the separation of somebody or something that we're close to, that's very dear to our hearts. Pastor Richard's was loss of a beloved spouse, but it can be in so many different ways. Ibisticks, yours was your mom, yours was your son, mine was my dad, mine was my grandmother. Many people as well, I'm sure, have suffered different loss. But where I find most people struggle is the loss that they've suffered that is not acknowledged, that society doesn't acknowledge. I can tell so many people, even now, 2 years down the line, his anniversary was just on the 28th of January this year, his second anniversary. And I still get sympathy for it. But that is acceptable loss. I know people who have lost their jobs. I know people, if God had so wished for Pastor Richard's wife to survive the ordeal, having the cancer, that is one of the major areas of loss. Depending on where any illness, one's status in life goes, it's a loss. One's job goes, it's a loss. Something happens to one's child that we don't expect, it's a loss. And we have to acknowledge all of that. And my loss is not more important than your loss. Your loss doesn't carry more weight and deserve more sympathy than the next person's loss. Everybody's loss is individual. And that is what I find, unfortunately, and more so for females, the Afro-Caribbean background, have a raw deal. So they're expected to carry on. Some even get thrown the statement of, is your own different? Some have an interest in dating again, maybe even 10 years down the line or however long, and they're still asked the question, what is wrong with you? You're selfish. What about your children? And it's very difficult for anybody, especially women, for any of us, it's very difficult to stand alone and be different. We all want to be part of a community. We all want to be accepted. So if I'm accepted on 10 fronts, rather than want the fullness of my life, I'll be prepared to give up something as important as having a life partner. That is one thing. The other thing is, with all the other losses people experience, loss is the parent of grief. And we throw grief around, you hear it in so many different forms. But loss is the parent of grief. From grief comes all the different stages. It's been studied extensively in psychiatry, in psychology, it's been studied. And now it's been extended into our general existence. Everything we do, there is a grief process. There is a process of mourning, from denial to acceptance. And for many people, outwardly, they seem to have accepted. But when you, like I said to you, Ibistix, this morning, I said, I like one-on-one. I'm not a crowd person because I can give of myself and I can get from the person and I can put my finger on their pulse where they're actually coming from. And a lot of my patients, it's the same thing. I don't have the privilege of sitting with them and talking, but I have the opportunity, I can refer them to services that can provide counseling. But I have a little trick I use. I say, you might not quite be ready for counseling, so I will keep seeing you. And that's just my way of giving them a little longer to be able to trust, to be able to open up. The first stage of grief, we know it's denial. Like I said, I had come back from Nigeria on the 27th of January, 2020. I'd arrived back in London that morning and I called home to just say, I'm back. How is everybody? And my brother was talking to me and we were just normal chatting. And then the next thing I heard this almighty scream. And I'm like, what is going on? So on the phone, I was seeing it live and direct. And he was telling me, what should I do? What should I do? And straight away, I put myself in autopilot. And I said, put him down, put him on a firm surface, take him off the bed, put him down, start doing CPR. I could see him. I knew somewhere in the deep recesses of my training, I knew my father was gone. But I told my brother, start doing CPR. And he started. I said, give him mouth to mouth. He started. I knew that my other sister, I had two phones side by side. And while he was doing that, I was speaking to my other sister. I said, go home. And she said, what is it? I said, go home. I just said, Daddy, go home. And straight away, she jumped in her car. And while I was talking to my brother, my mind was, when she gets there, it will be okay. Everything will be fine. They will go to the hospital. He'll be okay. I was in complete denial. I know I was, but I needed to be in denial for me to lead my family, for want of a better word. I'm not the first or anything, but everybody would be, Amoni, what should we do? And I needed to be calm and composed to be able to lead them. But the mistake is that some people stay in denial for prolonged periods. Some people go into the anger phase and push everybody, nobody can come close to them. They become dragons, they become horrible, but it's their grief and they must go through that phase. And that phase is part of the healing from their loss. And we must understand what it is they're going through. So if Pastor Richard was shouting at his children that time, which I'm sure he wasn't, or if his children were being not listening or being irritable or always just doing being not themselves, that is part of the healing. With my grandmother, nobody would expect that an 89-year-old is not expected to die. She had suffered a stroke. She was old, but she was my mother. Let me put it that way. And eventually, when I went for her funeral, I promised myself I would not let anybody get close to me. It was too painful. I couldn't. I was married, I had a child, and I stood at her graveside. My father had to come and pull me back because I was like, what do you mean you're putting Mama in here?
That box, yeah. And Doctor, I want to stop it there for a little bit, and I want Pastor Richard, did you feel the same way? You know, that did some of these things that she said, you know, is it familiar? You experienced them, didn't you?
Yeah, and to some extent. For example, I kept asking myself, is that how people die? But it wasn't looking real. We were together on Monday, Thursday, and now what are we talking about? You know, there was that dynasty. Is it true? You know, so that stage was there. But by the time I left that hospital that afternoon, after we settled mortuary and all of that, I kept asking myself, is that how people die? Is it that easy? How? You know, so there was that stage of denial. But what I have come to realize that the extent to which each of us dwell in the stages differs from one person to the other. And that's a function of your strengths and a number of other things. You know, that was it. Yes, there was that stage for me.
Yeah. Let me go back to Dr. Monia. You know, we've talked about the different stages. We've talked about denial and all the processes. So then how can we, assuming there's somebody here today and she's been through, or he or she has, of course, you said loss is the parent of grief. And then how do we begin to open up ourselves to receive love again? Are there any tools? Are there any things that we can do to arrive in the conclusion that we want to?
I think for me, from a professional perspective, is accept yourself.
Okay.
Accept where you're at. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you've done anything wrong or you've offended anybody. That is the journey of life. And you must embrace life. You must embrace living. Accept yourself, honor yourself. We must all honor ourselves. And Pastor Richard has absolutely honored himself. He knew what he wanted. He knew what was good for him. And he made no apologies about it. However, a lot of times society are not so kind. So even for other people, men and women, who may want to honor themselves, they may feel unsupported in the process. I have a friend now who lost her husband to cancer 5 years ago. She's only turning 50 in March, so she was 45. And she's brought up her children, 3 of them so far. And every time I see her, I ask her, okay, come and tell me quietly, what's his name? And she says, oh, money, leave me. I'm not even thinking about that. And I said, why? Why? Don't you want a friend? Don't you want a companion? And she has given me lots of reasons, and I can identify with every one of them. And I think that is where society has a huge role to play in allowing everyone, men and women, to be themselves, to acknowledge themselves, to honor themselves. And once you honor yourself, you will not get it wrong. You will find love. If it's what you want to do and you tell yourself this is what you want to do. Ibinabo has been conditioned by society. But if you talk to Ibistix, who is the real you will hear what you need to tell yourself. And if you have a few close people, friends, family, your church family that can be honest with you, they will tell you. And I think for me personally, that is what I tell my friends. That is what I tell my patients. I said, what do you want to do? And many people say in a very quiet voice, I would like to marry again, almost as if they're ashamed to say it. And I say it loud. Say, I can't hear you. Say it loud. Write it on a piece of paper. Put it on the wall. You can't say you can't want something and not shout it from the rooftop and let people know how do you expect to get it?
Okay. Now, Doctor, I have some questions here that I'd like to ask you. First question is for Pastor Richard. Pastor Richard, how do you live with your new wife without comparing?
I'm very, very conscious of the fact that these are two different persons. So as I got ready to get married, I knew I must not compare because they are two different persons. And of course, my late wife and I were friends from school. We dated for long. So that one had an effect, an impact on the kind of friendship that existed between us. But here was something of a shorter courtship. So I don't. Anytime my mind glides to want to compare, I caution myself because it's unrealistic.
Well, you caution yourself. And then there's another question. And in choosing a woman to marry, do you look for the same with a woman with the same or similar qualities with your late wife?
Yes. If I said I liked my late wife and loved her, and there were things that were enthralling to me, it's only natural that I want some of those things. For example, I'm not a quarrelsome person. She too wasn't a quarrelsome person. So we had peace for 25 years. We were together. There was no physical fighting or any such thing. We disagree. We also know we need to resolve to move forward. So, of course, I needed somebody who will not give me wahala. I cannot fight. I didn't go for boxing. I didn't go for boxing lesson.
You didn't go for Mike Tyson.
So there are some qualities I desire. And that was when I was praying, I told God what I wanted. I know I needed a friend. My late wife was my friend. I needed a sister. There are two relationships that are the same, but different perspectives. Then I needed somebody who will accept that I have children, who will be a mother figure. And I wanted somebody who will support me in ministry because she was very, very supportive. She was serious with Christ ahead of me. So I imagine what she did, praying that I let my husband surrender. So when I became a pastor, yes, she was there. So I needed somebody who will still support me. So to that extent, yes, there were things in her that I wanted in the new person. But beyond that, I would be wrong to expect that the person should have complexion, her size. No. That's the way I answer that.
I think that's a very honest question. So I have a question for Dr. Omani. For people who don't have any issues accepting reality, is there any danger in moving past the denial phase in any instance?
I think what we have to know is that all the stages of grief or all the stages of mourning, there's no, it's general. It's a reference point. Some people at the time of the physical death of a loved one, they're in acceptance, especially if it was a prolonged process.
Yeah.
So by the time the person passes, it's almost a relief that their loved one has come out of the suffering that they experienced. Some people can stay in denial for many, many years. And don't forget, I said that loss is not just physical loss of a death or transition. Loss can be job, can be all aspects of life. So if you look at it that way, there's no prescription for time frame for grief. Everybody is individual. It can be, some people are angry permanently, and there's nothing, all you can do is sit with them and hold space until that phase passes. You cannot hasten it or shorten it, whatever you do. You can support them, but it's their journey to go through. And I think Pastor Richard has said it beautifully. He honored himself by stating what he needed, and that's what he got. If he had left it open, and just left it like a blank check, then anything could have come to him and he wouldn't know what he wanted. He would possibly may have gone down a route that he didn't plan or expect or even want. But he was very clear. And in being clear, he honored himself.
So what he did was to write out specifically what he wanted. So I wanted a wife that would be da 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 da. So in doing that, he was honoring himself. Yeah.
He was clear. Yes, he stated what he wanted, what he needed. It's not written in stone, but it's a framework for him to live his life, or for anyone to live their life. Somebody can lose their job and say, I want to be happy. Happiness can be being a truck pusher. Happiness can be being a professor of psychiatry. What does he want?
Yeah. Pastor Mayor, thank you so much for that perspective. And that, there's some times when, you see children lose their mother or their father and they become angry and rebellious. So that is a grieving sign, a sign of grieving, yeah?
Anger is pain.
Oh.
Anger is pain. We mustn't condone bad behavior or insult or injury to another party. But when you see anger, especially in the context of loss, that person is experiencing very deep pain.
Oh my goodness gracious me. I want us to be happy again. I mean, let me just, Pastor Richard, this question is for you. Do you still have pictures and memories of your late wife around the house? If yes, to what extent? And does your new wife handle it?
Just now, no. Okay. And I'll tell you the few pictures. I moved into a new house, my property. So the few pictures we have out now are basically our wedding pictures, no other picture. But sincerely, I have a history which I cannot obliterate. Okay. I am looking at getting a family picture of me, my late wife, and the children together, because that's a reality I cannot clean out of my life. And anybody who sees it should be able to relate with that. For the 5 years when I had lost her, I had all the pictures the way it is. A pastor friend came and said, please remove this thing. I said, no, that's the only way I still feel I'm close to her. And then one day, my daddy in the Lord visited me and he said something. He said, I hope you know that when you remarry, you can't have all these pictures all over. He said, because it will also send a wrong signal to the wife you're getting married to. And so I picked it. But so for a long time, I left everything as it was. It was my way of still feeling, oh, yes. But then when I moved into my new apartment, I removed everything. There was no picture. Anyways, all you find there now is my wedding picture and a few of birthday pictures given to me by the church. So nothing. But like I said, there is a history that I cannot deny, which nobody can deny. A family picture of myself, my late wife, and the 4 children that God gave us together. I guess everybody should be able to relate with that.
Perfect. Now, this is so remarkably interesting. And if you're watching this video and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's Ibinabo Enebi. And now, assuming there's somebody who's watching today, final words, and the person is going through that process, Pastor Richard, what would you say to such a person?
I will have a word for such one, but I wanted to ask the doctor a question. Can I?
Okay, please do.
Beautiful. I see some of the questions popping up, and I heard what she said about you can't hasten the process of grieving. I want to find out, is there no level at which you begin to think this is excessive? And how can you help somebody? For example, I'm talking about 8 years now, going to 9 years. If there is still somebody who is in the grieving stage, and you can see it manifesting in behavioral traits and things like that, how do you help such a one?
Thank you, Pastor Richard. Yes, there are cases like that where people feel stuck, and how you know is that it starts having a negative impact on everybody around them, and even on the person that has been bereaved. But I was going to give you a round of applause that from what you said last, you may be coming out the other end, which is acceptance. And I hope you will tell Ibinabo, who will tell me when you put that family portrait up in your house. When you accept that that was your life for 25 plus X years, your beautiful wife now will accept. You hadn't accepted. So nobody else is going to tell you how to do it or what to do. If there are people who are struggling and it's having an impact in their everyday life, either their families or their spouses or their friends will speak on their behalf and say, this guy is struggling or this lady is struggling. Or by themselves, they come and say, I can't get my head around it. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. I can't concentrate. My job is suffering. They stop taking care of themselves. And that is where the first treatment will be some sort of psychotherapy. That's the first line. Some people go as far as needing medication, but medication is never first line. It's psychotherapy, and it's just being able to talk about their experience. They've experienced their soul loss, and you cannot get away from that. And in their own time, some people might take 6 months, some people might take 10 years, 20 years, however long. It's very individual. I cannot prescribe what is the valid time frame for any individual. But with support, they can learn to come to some sort of acceptance of what is their new normal. Even this pandemic we're in is a grief process for some people. Their whole lives have been turned upside down. And we're going to see the consequences of it several years down the line, not just now. So it's time and support.
Time and support. And I just have somebody say this. I hear Dr. Amoni, but some people remain in a state of denial for so long, and it becomes destructive and counterproductive. Some even enter into depression. How do we help such people? I think that you've answered this question with your last response, yeah?
Yes, depression is one of the depression is the grief phase before acceptance. And we tend to see most people when they're in that stage, when they're going into a depression and their life is literally grinding to a halt. And then they realize it's either they put a gun to their head or they seek help.
So we're running out of time, but yeah, Pastor Richard, do you have any last minute?
Yeah, there was that question you asked me. How do I advise anybody going through this situation?
Oh, please, yes.
Okay, number one, I beg that person to come to realities with what has happened. That's number one. Number two, the society needs to help such persons, by making them realize. For example, I have a number of people I appreciate a lot who helped me. One was my mother-in-law, the mother of my late wife. She was the first to tell me, come, Richard, say you go marry again, you'll be small boy. She was the first. And she started talking to my children. When Papa go marry again, I don't know why God took my daughter, but your father is still.
Oh,
that was good support, and I love that woman for it. Then I had a loving church family. I have a general overseer. They all kept talking to me, making me see things from the realistic point of view. So that's why I said the society will need to help such a one. All of these, you know, like the guy who asked me, boy, you know, go marry. That was the kind of support. And some told me they couldn't ask me because they don't know how I would feel. They didn't know how I would react. But I think we shouldn't be afraid. Those questions probably would have reduced the waiting time for me. Are you with me? And then the other advice is that for anybody going through this, there is no point waiting so long. I waited 5 years plus. I have had to tell friends who are in this situation, boy, you don't have to be like me. 2 years, you must smart out, because the years you lose waiting, thinking, and still thinking you are doing your late spouse honor, time is going. Time waits for no one. The earlier you come out of it and settle back to life, the better. And these are the advice I give. And I pray that God will help such persons in Jesus' name.
Oh my goodness, Pastor Richard, that is so deep. That is so deep. And it doesn't mean you don't honor the spouse. It's just that you have to go back to life. And I really like your mother-in-law. Are you together? What's the relationship like?
Oh, very together. She is still alive. And each time I visited her, the first question is, Richard, where is your wife? I want to see her. And of course, when I got married, I went to see her with my wife, and you could see the joy in her. She welcomed her. If I call her to greet her, the first person she asks for is my wife. I hope she's fine. When are you people coming to visit me again? You know, and that's the kind of person she is. That's why I said the society has a lot to do, helping people to cope with things like this.
Oh, and she helped you to find love after loss.
Yeah, she sure helped.
She helped you, yes. Yeah. And Dr. Moni, any last words?
Honor yourself, always.
Honor yourself, yeah. Honor yourself, always. Fantastic. So guys, I just want to say thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. And this conversation continues next Saturday. I will be talking to a special guest who found love at the time when she least expected it. And you don't want to miss it, because I also have a therapist as well. You don't want to miss it. And if anyone wants to contact you, how would they contact you? Pastor Richard, Dr. Moni.
Okay. Well, I can give my number. And before I did that, there's something I almost forgot. That's the cushioning effect of my children.
Oh.
The cushioning effect. You know, they were very supportive. They always tried to be around. For children, they couldn't come telling me, Daddy, go and marry, but they kept taking with a cousin of mine who is very close to me. They know we are very close. Tell your brother to marry you. Tell your brother to marry. You know, and so they were quite there for me. They supported me. And when I got married, they made life easy, you know, a soft landing for the wife I married. So the house is still a happy home. So I would have been making a mistake if I did not acknowledge their support in this matter. They were quite there for me. It might not have been smooth all through, but if I'm talking about 75 to 80% of compliance, I think that's a good one. So I give them kudos.
Oh my gosh. Oh, listen, I'm so happy that you found love after loss, and I love the testimonies and the support structure that you had. And I love the message that your mother-in-law sent to the society and what you're also saying to the society. And I also like that Dr. Amoni has called out society to stop conditioning people to think in a certain way. So until this time next week, I want to say thank you very much. And I'm going to call you Dr. Amoni. I'm going to call you Pastor Richard. And bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.
And Pastor Richard, I would like to meet your wife too.
Right. And she will meet your wife. When she makes her, she will meet her. You better tell me, because when she calls, you'd like to meet her. Maybe if I'm in Nigeria, I'll call. Yeah. Right. So bye.
You have my number, so can always reach me.
So I'm just going to put us on a WhatsApp group so we can quickly do a group call. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.